I had taken my cell phone and I turned the audio recording on just because I wanted to capture every word. And from the moment I walked in to the moment I walked out was about 13 minutes. And it was a horrendously bad conversation.
Hello, you are listening to NPE Stories. This is a podcast where NPEs can share their story. I am your host, Lily, and I found out I was an NPE through an ancestry DNA test that changed my life forever. NPE is a term that stands for Not Parent Expected or Non-Paternal Event. This means that one or more of our parents are not who we believe them to be. NPE Stories is a podcast where NPEs can share their story of what their original family was like, how they found out they were an NPE, and what their journey has been like since the day they found out. And welcome to episode 220. And this episode will be my final episode of season 6. I do episodes for an entire year, so this was my 6th year of listening to NPEs and their stories. And I'm going to take a break for this summer, definitely for the month of July. I will be back to answering emails sometime in August and hopefully publishing season 7 starting in August of 2025. And so I have a special guest, really a friend of mine, someone that I've really come to adore because I've learned more about him through reading his book. But he's going to be my final guest for season 6. And today I am speaking with Steve. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Lily, great to talk to you.
It's so good to see you. I think the last time I saw you in person, we were sharing an Uber or a Lyft to the airport.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That is correct. That is correct. And it was that little Uber was a great opportunity for me to really get to know you.
Yes, the first time I met you, you were, we were at the Untangling Our Roots Summit. I'll put a link down below for that. And you went up for open mic night and you sang a song a cappella. Do you remember this? Do you remember signing up for
that? People won't let me forget it. Yes, I sang an a cappella version of all things Joni Mitchell's Both Sides Now, but of course it totally rewrote the words to be about DNA from Both Sides Now, about my NPE experience. And I thought I was just clowning around, but oh my God, that thing took on a life of its own.
We loved it because we needed an icebreaker, a couple hundred of us that didn't know each other. And here people are getting up, sharing poems and stories. And yours was so funny and creative. I loved it.
Well, and I'll get you a post. I'll get you a link for that too. So if anybody wants to listen to it, you can put that at the.
I will. Okay, so there will be a link below to what we are referring to, and you'll see Steve in action.
And I apologize in advance for the language.
I think I remember a part about, was it a head full of hair? I can't remember, but there.
Yes, I was talking about my genetic inheritance, and while I have heart disease and I'm colorblind, I did get a full head of hair, so I'm going to be fine.
Steve, I feel like we should probably mention your last name in case people want to look up. Are you okay with that?
Oh, absolutely. So my name is Steve Osborne. Occasionally you'll see it's just my first initial J, Stephen Osborne.
And you're the author of a book that I really, really adored. I was luckily enough to be picked as a beta reader for it. It was called Did Not Anticipate. You tell me the full name.
DNA Did Not Anticipate. Yes. And it's available on Amazon, and you could probably also order it through your bookstore.
I'll put the link down below for DNA Did Not Anticipate, but I really enjoyed reading that because not only did I get to read an NPE story, which I always enjoy, I always identify with, but I don't know if is this appropriate to say, but I laughed a lot during it. I mean, although there's some really horrifically sad parts, there was parts where I was able to laugh as well.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, because that's exactly what we desired, right? I'm a frustrated stand-up comic, and I wanted it to be funny. But it is, of course, it's a very serious story. And there are parts of it that are incredibly painful. And there are also some parts that are very, I think people call it raw. Um,
Yes.
and I've just always been the kind of person to just tell it like it is. So there's no varnish on some of these things. And some of them are pretty ugly.
Yes. And thank you to your amazing wife, Becky. You two just have such great personalities. Becky helped you as well. I'm assuming when you say we for the book.
Yes, ma'am. So Becky also wrote, we kind of switch back and forth on certain chapters. She'll tell what she saw. I'll tell what I saw. She's a part-time professional genealogist. So she was the one who we're kind of getting into the story a little bit, but she was doing my family tree. And my mother had always told me, and all of us kids, about our Native American heritage. We had strong Native American heritage. And after, I don't know, 18 months, Becky said, I can't find anybody in your family tree who's Native American. Would you consider taking a DNA test so that we could see your genetic makeup? Of course, my answer was, sure, what could possibly go wrong with that? And so I took one and we're off.
Let's get an understanding of your raising family, what you knew to be true. Why don't you go ahead and start at the beginning and tell me about the family you were raised with?
So my family configuration, even before the NPE started, is just pretty bizarre in and of itself. I have 14 siblings between half, step, and whole. And that's because there's so many marriages and divorces and remarriages amongst my family. So specifically my parents. So I always tell somebody I'll name my siblings. If you can name them when I'm done, I'll buy you a drink. And the story very quickly, I'm going to go through this rapid fire, so hold on. My mom married a man named Ed. You don't have to remember Ed. They had two children, my older sisters, half sisters, Kathy and Terry. She divorced Ed, married my raising father, and for purposes of this podcast, I call him my dad. He's not my biological father, but he's my dad. His name is Jack, hence the J in J. Stephen Osborne, Jack Stephen Osborne. They had two children, myself and my younger sister, Laura. Well, some things aren't meant to last, and their marriage was one of them. So she divorced Jack, married my stepdad, Jerry. He had two kids from a previous marriage, Tanya and Renee. They had a child between them, my half brother, Adam. So it's Kathy, Terry, Tanya, Renee, Steve, Laura, and Adam. That's in one house. Well, my dad, he remarried. And he remarried a woman who had 8 children: Arlene, Darlene, Charlene, Francine, Danny, Johnny, Gary, and Jerry, who are my stepbrothers and sisters. But they're also my second cousins, who already had the last name of Osborne when my dad married my stepmom. It's okay. We're from Kentucky. Nobody cares. And that's so we haven't got to the NPE part yet, my DNA surprise. And my family tree already looks like a vine. I mean, it's so twisted. But even with that, even with that many siblings, I never felt like I belonged. If you've ever seen Sesame Street and you heard the song, which one of these things is not like the others? Which one of these things doesn't fit? And that was me. It was always me. I love my siblings. Let me be perfectly clear. They are wonderful people. They were never mean to me in any other way that, the typical sibling stuff. They were always loving and caring. But I knew I was different. At 11 years old, I asked my mom if I was adopted. That's how obvious it was to me at an early age. I didn't look like them. I didn't think like them. And bizarrely, even though we were in the same family, raised in the same house, I didn't even hold the same values. I just thought it was bizarre. I thought something had to be wrong. My mother just brushed it off. She said, "No, you weren't adopted. I had you." which is a little misleading because she knew what I was asking. She answered a different question. Well, actually, she answered the exact question that I asked, but not what the meaning of the question. So I was having, I'm sure other people have said this, right? Monocopsis, right? Something wasn't right, but you couldn't put your finger on it. And I lived my whole life like that. I would literally, at times, my wife Becky would tell you, I would come home after being with my family. I would sit on the couch and say, I'm an alien. I don't, I don't belong in this world. I can't, I, I can't connect with these people, which was so bizarre because they weren't doing anything to cause that. But I couldn't figure out why it was. It got to the point where either consciously or subconsciously, I began to put space between me and my siblings because I couldn't stand how negative I would feel about myself after being around them. They all connected, they were all part of the tribe. And I was the little black sheep on the outside of the flock, just wondering how I got there. So now, fast forward from 11 years old to 57 years old. Becky's doing my genealogical tree. She tells me to take a DNA test. Sure, what could possibly go wrong? I take it, and like everybody else, I get these surprise results on my DNA connections report. I find a Canadian cousin, which is just impossible because my entire family's in the Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky area. I mean, nobody's outside of 50 miles. And there's no way I have a cousin who was in Prince Edward Island, 1,500 miles away. Like, no, can't be. I know all my aunts and uncles. And his name's John Watson, like Dr. John Watson from Sherlock Holmes. He's a wonderful man, good Christian guy, just heart of gold. But we couldn't figure it out. Couldn't figure it out. How could this possibly? Now, we were real first cousins, not like the cheap, fifth cousin. Right? You got 70 of those. No, this was first cousin stuff. Matter of fact, bordering on possibly half sibling. The CM count was really high. We couldn't figure it out. So what we decided was we would have my younger sister, Laura, who looks like Cameron Diaz, by the way. That should have been my first clue. Because I don't look like Cameron Diaz. She's a beautiful woman, both inside and out. And said, Laura, can you take a DNA test to help us kind of figure this out? She takes the DNA test and she calls me one day and says, Stevie, I got my DNA test back. That's great. I'm sitting at the gate. I'm on an airplane. I'm sitting at a gate in Savannah, Georgia, waiting to take off. She says, I got my DNA test back. I don't see John Watson anywhere. He doesn't show up on my connections report. And it also says I have a half brother, J.O. Who's J.O.? Because, of course, she knows me as just Stevie, of her brother. I says, J.O., that's me. It's how I identify myself on Ancestry. And she said, that can't be. I mean, you're my full brother. Mom is our mom. Dad is our dad. And I said, no, love. What you just said to me is that mom is our mom, but dad is your dad. He's not mine. And the reason that this was so devastating to me was that my dad, Jack Osborne, was a god to me. He was the one person up to that point in my life that had shown me true, unconditional love. That man would give up his life if it were to save mine. And I know this because he said those words to me so many times. And even though my parents divorced when I was 4, he had maintained our relationship to the day that he died when he was 66 in 1999. Dad was my foundation, as it is with so many men. And Lily, I do want to talk about men and NPEs a little bit later. He was so central to my life. And in that instant, I lost him. I lost him in 1999 when he died, but it was different. When you lose somebody to death, especially a man, a son, right? There is this expectation that you carry on the family name. There's a proud bond in being the son of a man and carrying forth his legacy. So when you lose him in death, there's a certain amount of honor. When you lose him to a lie, not only did I lose him again, but this time I felt the fool, right? I I felt as though everything that I had established inside of me was somehow a falsehood too. And I'm on a plane. I'm on a plane. I I can't do anything. I'm sitting in a seat listening to this. I decided I was going to get off the plane, and I stood up and they closed the boarding door. There was a short flight to Atlanta. We landed. I got off the plane. I was trying to find a place to be alone. In Hartsfield Airport, Atlanta, if anybody's not aware, it is the busiest airport in the world. So, it's just impossible. But my world was just crumbling around me. I had no idea what to do. And like so many NPEs, when they get their DNA surprise, I mean, you literally leave time and space. It's existential. It's you float above yourself. It's surreal, but at the same time, it's heartbreaking. That's how I learned some of the most private information you will ever receive. I learned in the most public place could ever be. And God bless Becky, my wife. She's you know trying to do everything that she can. We were also traveling with friends, so it was just chaos. It was chaos.
Oh God, that'd be so hard. I get goosebumps not only when I read that in the book, but listening to you now, and to be in such that busy place where you can't have that moment to. I mean, it's a shock. It's a complete numb feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, and you want to cry, and you're thinking, what are all the people around me gonna, what are they gonna think? And that's at some point you just go, you know what, screw it, I don't care what anybody thinks.
Mhm.
I can't hold these back anymore.
How were you the following days, weeks after that, if you remember that time period?
Oh, I absolutely remember that time period, and I was like every other NPE, I believe, that has had the DNA surprise. I was in shock. I I would go through this cycle every 10 minutes of my world's a wreck. And then your logical brain takes over and you go, well, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Nothing has truly changed. You just have a realization. Nothing's changed over the last 57 years of your life. What would be different? Wait a minute. It hasn't really changed. You know what? This isn't that big of a deal. It's all the same as it was yesterday. And then the bottom would fall out again. You would, your gut would just fall out. My best analogy is if you can imagine somebody's created a Lego figure of you, Legos, you're made out of Legos, and somebody takes you in and drops you on a hardwood floor, and you could just see those Legos scatter across the room. That's the way I felt. And then panic would set in, and I would hear the vacuum cleaner in the other room coming to suck up all the Legos. Right? I mean, you're in an irrational place in your mind. And it was devastating. I was fortunate. I was 57 years old. I'm a business owner, and I was already winding down everything. I was going into semi-retirement. A lot of people learn this much earlier in their lives, and I think it has a much greater effect on them, and sometimes it affects them in a more far-reaching way.
So I know that your dad, your birth certificate father, passed in 99. Is your mom still around? Are you in contact with her? Did you get answers from her?
So yeah, this is really where the story starts to get strange. So my mother was alive at the time. She has since passed. She was alive. The first thing I did was I called some of my other sisters who were older than I was. to get as much information as I could from what they remembered. I didn't get a whole lot. My mother and I were already estranged. And the reason we were estranged was because of the way she treated my birth father. He was so important to me. She did everything she could to try to separate us, to drive a wedge between us. She lied frequently about him. He was a drug dealer, a child molester, you name it, Steelers fan, whatever. None of those things were true.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a very narcissistic personality. So at one point, I had decided decades before that it would be best if she had a minimal presence in my life. So we didn't have regular communication. And then this happened. And so now I'm furious. I am enraged. There's a concept that new trauma brings forth old trauma. And so I called her and told her that I had found something that belonged to her and that I wanted to drop it off at the house. And what that was my cousin, John Watson, had found a picture of my biological father, whose name is Peter Holmes. So there's a huge irony there. Somewhere in this story, Holmes and Watson marry. They have a kid who's my dad, my biological father, and he was Canadian. And he had immigrated to the U.S. He worked for British Airways, and he ends up settling in Cincinnati, 13 miles away from my mom and my dad. And she had an affair 4 years into their marriage that produced me. I find all this stuff out. I have all this information. I have a picture of him. The picture that John sent me, when I looked at it, it was like looking at a ghost. It was like looking at a picture of myself 20 years, 30 years prior. And then I also had a picture of him at the time that my mother would have known him. So I go to confront my mom. And Lily, this is a message for your listeners. Early on in the process, you are still processing so many things. And I was. I went there in my mind. I said to myself, I went there to get answers. I didn't. I already knew the answers. And I also knew that my mom had a casual relationship with the truth at best, so I couldn't trust anything that she told me. I walked in, I sat down, I slid a picture of my biological father across the table, and the only thing I said was, "Got anything you want to tell me?" And she picked up the picture, looked at the picture, looked at me, looked at the picture, looked at me, did that in rapid succession, threw the picture down, and said, "I have no idea who that's supposed to be. Who's that supposed to be, your father?" Well, that's a pretty bizarre question to ask. Why would you ask that question? I show you a picture of some random guy and you say, "Is that my dad?" Why would you ask that, Mom? I mean, Jack Osborne's my dad, right? And her next words were, "I'm not admitting to anything." As you can imagine, the conversation did not go well. I had taken my cell phone and I turned the audio recording on just because I wanted to capture every word. And from the moment I walked in to the moment I walked out was about 13 minutes. And it was a horrendously bad conversation. And again, to your listeners, I kind of went full knives out and I went at her. And I just was not the best version of myself. I listened to that recording and I'm both impressed and embarrassed. Impressed by my word selection and embarrassed by my word selection. It it was not good, and she was in full retreat mode, and I was in full attack mode. And she, one of the things she said before I left, it just absolutely just totally pissed me off to no end, was, "I don't know what you're so upset about. Look at your life. Everything turned out pretty well for you." I was like, "That's it? I've had a little bit of success in my life. So you're absolved from lying to me for 57 years. No matter how many times in different ways that I asked you, you're absolved from treating my dad the way you treated him." Anyway, I knew every second that I spent there was a second I wasn't going to get back, so I left. It took me multiple months to realize I did not go over there seeking answer. I had every answer I needed. I went over there to avenge both my dad and my bio dad, because we found out he knew as well, and she forced him out of my life. And so I went there with the intent to injure. And I unfortunately did a pretty good job of it. I had harbored all of that resentment, all of that hate from years past before I even had my DNA surprise. And my DNA surprise just brought it all forward. And I said it before, I'll say it again. I was not the best version of myself. My healing hadn't really begun yet. And it would take a long time for me to get to the place where I was able to put everything in a proper and real perspective. And unfortunately, before that point, she passed. So in this life, we haven't been able to reconcile, but I'd like to think that we will at some point. I'd like to think that she can maybe see and or hear me and realize things are better. Which brings me to the healing part of my story. People a lot of times now will say, you sound like you've gotten to a good place. How did you get there? And I will tell you that I didn't get here. I was taken here by the love and care and concern of the people around me who loved me. Becky, my wife, my wonderful daughters, my sisters, my Cameron Diaz sister, and I have a sister, my oldest sister, Kathy, who looks like Cher. So, all these beautiful women around, like, yeah, you're ugly as hell. You should have known. But they all really kind of cocooned me and kept in constant touch with me. And they would just say wonderful things. I found out in September, my DNA surprise, Christmas came, and my Cameron Diaz sister, Laura, and we always called each other Luke and Leia because, we were of the kind of like that same age, and Star Wars had just come out. And we always, imagined the two of us fighting the forces of evil together. And here's Christmas, my first Christmas after my DNA surprise, and I'm just devastated. Lily, I'm an emotional wreck. And I'm setting up the bar for our Christmas party. And she comes up behind me and puts her arms around me and just squeezes me so tight. And she just whispers in my ear, "You're still my Luke. Nothing's changed." And it's just those wonderful healing moments that brought me forward to a really healthy place where I'm okay with everything that has happened. And I mean everything, because part of the strangeness of my story is after I left my mom and I came back to my house, I was so mad that she had lied to me and, stonewalled me. And I said, I wish there was just some way that I knew what had happened. I just want to know the truth. And Becky says to me, "Have you read her book?" And I said, "I'm sorry, her what?" "Her book." I said, "My mom didn't write a book." She goes, "Yes, your mom wrote a book. It's right here on Amazon, self-published 2010. Couldn't believe it. So I get a copy of the book. It talks about her life, but on pages 6 and 7, it also talks about the circumstances around my conception. And I'm just going to shorten it tremendously, but we find out that I was the product of a out-of-town amphetamine-fueled swingers party. So I got that going for me. And, talk about pushing your kid to the front of the line, giving them a good head start. I have to tell you, there's nothing stranger, first of all, than reading a book your parent wrote, one of your parents wrote, and then having them talk about, you never want to hear your mom say swinger party, right? And then to read it, and then to realize she starts it off with, she had already had 2 children. Those are my older sisters, Kathy and Terry. And I'm the next in the birth order. And we realized just by putting the dates and everything together, oh my God, that's me. So, yeah, strangeness abounds.
I can't believe she put that in a book. I mean, a way that you're able to figure it out.
She wrote very generically. She didn't use any names. She
Yep.
didn't use any dates, but she did talk about certain events. And since I know all the people and I know when my sisters were born, I know when she married my dad, I know when I was conceived and born, I know who my biological father is, I know when she divorced my dad. You read the book, it's written in chronological order. You go, that has to be me right there.
Yes.
Yeah. And that in and of itself was also just another, you know, kick to the genealogical acorns. You're just like, are you freaking kidding me? This is
Wow.
how it happened. So
Yep.
that's why I have a Canadian father.
And let's talk about your Canadian father. Were you able to meet him or learn more information about him?
So my biological father is a gentleman by the name of Peter Holmes. He was Canadian. He moved to New York in the mid 50s. He worked for British Airways, which is interesting in and of itself, because we'll talk about my career. Becky was trying to learn more about John Watson's uncles and trying to figure out which uncle was my dad. And she eliminated a couple of them very quickly. She found this Peter Holmes guy, and she found, of all things, immigration records. He would fly in and out of the U.S. We didn't know why at the time, but from New York to London, London to New York, New York to Madrid, back and forth, Miami, blah, blah, blah. And then New York to London, London to Cincinnati, Ohio. And what we come to find out is he works for British Airways. That's why he was going in and out of the country. And she finally located him in Cincinnati. And in the early 1960s, I was born in 63. And that was pretty much the bingo moment for her. She's like, no, because what the issue was is we couldn't locate anybody who was anywhere near where my parents were. And so sex, so I've been told, requires a certain proximity, a certain distance, typically measured in inches. And so we couldn't figure out either Montreal or Prince Edward Island. How does that happen? And so we find him in Cincinnati. And then we figured out that he was flying my mom to Miami, Florida, which is, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Did they ever see each other again? You said that you mentioned he knew.
He did know. We talk about that in the book, not trying to sell the book, but it's just the details of it. But I didn't think I'd ever met him. And my oldest sister, Kathy, said, actually, I believe you did meet him. And we put our collective memories together. She remembered my mom on the phone talking to somebody named Peter, because now I'm 4 years old, but that makes Kathy 11 or 12 years old. So while I don't have a great memory of it, she does. And she said that we were in a car together. Mom was dropping us off at a swimming pool, community swimming pool, when a dark gentleman came up to the side of the car, and his name was Peter, and I was in the front seat, and they were having this conversation about me. So I believe at a very early age, I did meet him. He passed away in 1982, so I never got to meet him in my adult life.
Did he have any children?
He had no other biological children that we know of at the moment. I'm waiting for that email to come in someday.
Yep.
He did have 2 adopted children, and all efforts to connect with them have just gone nowhere. They don't seem to have any interest in it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing about finding more siblings is we only know what we know. Someone could take a DNA test and all of a sudden you find out you have another sibling.
Another half sibling somewhere.
Another half sibling, exactly.
Well, I'm given 3-to-1 odds that I do. If anybody wants to take that, up to $100, 3-to-1 odds. Because probably one of the other things that really came out of this was, the whole conception about my mom She was a very religious person, very Pentecostal religion. And as we went back and had to assemble the timelines, it's not an attractive picture. I mean, the divorces and marriages and conceptions of the different children, some of those are separated in a matter of weeks. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So, and one of the things that when I had confronted my mom, I said, I called her Barb because that was her name. And, when you're really mad at your parents and you want to make them really mad, you just call them by their first name.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I said, you realize you've had 5 children with at least 4 different men. And if anybody else comes back with a divergent DNA test, you're going to be 5 for 5. That's Hall of Fame numbers. And she didn't say much to that.
Your mom, the way you describe some of your childhood, and I realize I should leave some of this to the book, but just the sheer amount of people, and I'm sorry, but some of them are very frightening that she brought around you guys as children. So many. The I don't know, even understand. At one point, it sounded like you were living on a different building on the property because there's so many. I can't remember now. Was it if it was foster children or vagrants? But it was
Yeah. So
wow.
it started off, my parents eventually ran they called it the one-way farm, a house that started off with late teens, older adults that would come and stay in our house just to try to get these people back on their feet. And some of them were convicted felons. A couple of them had killed people, and they were sleeping in our house. Yeah, and yeah, a lot of the details are in the book. And then at one point they converted to a foster home for children under 18. But we would have up to 7 foster kids in our house at one time. We already had 7 kids.
Oh my.
So, and the 7 kids that were, of course, being fostered all had issues of some sort. Maybe not issues of their own, but I mean, they're in foster care for a reason.
Yep.
And so, we didn't grow up, I don't think, in a loving, caring, nurturing environment. I tell people because it makes no difference. I grew up in a foster home. My bedroom had 6 bunk beds in it. It was me and 5 guys I don't know.
Oh,
They're not my brothers.
wow.
And some of them had violent criminal records.
Yeah.
And she was doing all this to help these people. And I think they did help a lot of people. But I also believe it was part of her narcissistic approach about, look how good I am helping these people. She put her own family at risk.
Mm-hmm.
And that was also, again, we say trauma, and trauma, begets trauma, brings up old trauma. And that was also part of the reason why, our conversation didn't go that well, because I was loaded for bear. But
Yeah.
I didn't realize it, until much later that, you just went over there just to take a verbal swing at her. Of course, I would never physically take a swing at her.
Yeah. You are really good at communicating and speaking and sharing your feelings. And that's why I'm so glad I have you on, because I don't get a lot of men NPEs. Do you have any idea behind that?
Oh, absolutely. Right. I mean, men, being men, manly men as we are, we've been told our entire lives that, big boys don't cry, shake it off. It's not that big of a thing, especially when it comes to strong emotions, and especially for a man, that special man in his life is his father, right? So there are so many reasons why men don't want to talk about this. The number one is we don't want to look weak, right? We certainly don't want to cry in front of anybody. Number two, there is a huge issue with feeling like an idiot, like you've been played, and you have been played by somebody, right? That man who you've worshipped all your life, if you have a good relationship with your father, I know not everybody does, that man that you've looked up to and you've modeled yourself up, suddenly that's a lie. It is, but it's not. But in the moment of your DNA surprise, it certainly looks like a lie. If you do the work and walk the path, you find out that it's not. So many men have been taught not to express or share. And this is one of the most vulnerable situations a man can be in. And I got to tell you guys, if you're listening, it's okay. It's okay. If you want to cry, there's never been a better reason for it. But here's the other thing. Guys, you have got to talk to somebody about this. You cannot bottle this up inside. This is corrosive. This will hurt you if you don't find a way to walk the path that you need to walk. You need to go from where you are, your DNA surprise. By the way, this goes for everybody. The day your DNA surprise happens, your NPE surprise happens, it's okay to sit down and just be devastated. And it's okay to take time for yourself. And it's okay to be sad and angry. After a while, I don't know how much time that is, right? You got to get up and you have to start moving forward. It's okay to camp in that place for a little bit. It's not okay to build a house. There's so much stuff inside of you that you need to work through. And it's the only way that you can truly get to a place of peace. You have to walk that path, and it's hard work. Guys, especially, I said it before, this resentment and this anger, it is corrosive. It will do you damage. You got to find a way to walk that path. That's been my experience in my 3+ years. I started off at a horrible place, devastated, angry, full of hate, not just for my NPE surprise, but for everything else, Lily, that you've read in the book that kind of added up to that brought me to that place. And it's no different with anyone else. There's things that have gone on in everybody's life that is not right. Those things are inside of you. But your DNA surprise is just a multiplier. It just makes it that much worse. So you've got to be willing to vent that. And I don't mean just scream and yell. I mean, you've got to work through it. When I was hit with my DNA surprise, and in the months afterwards, all of the same questions that everybody had were in my head. Why did they lie to me? Why didn't they tell me? Did they know? Well, I found out they knew. I asked so many times why I was different. Nobody said anything, right? And I was having so much difficulty dealing with it. But the more I worked through it, the more I thought about it, the more I ruminated on it, I realized that everybody had their reason for holding this secret. I'm not saying secrets are good. I'm just saying I began to understand what was going on. I also began to understand that my own perception was wrong. One of my favorite examples of this is my oldest daughter and I were out shopping for Christmas when she was just 4 or 5, just young enough to be so excited about Christmas, and going through this big box store wherever we were, looking at the next toy and the next this and the next that. She was just so super excited. And at one point, there was a Christmas display that she walked around, and she's looking at everything, and she loses sight of me. I know exactly where she is because I'm watching her like a hawk, but she can't see me. And in just a few seconds, she realizes that she can't see me. She's lost. So she starts to cry. And I come out from around the display. And I pick her up and said, "Baby, what's wrong?" She said, "Daddy, I was lost." I said, "Love, you weren't lost. I knew where you were the entire time. Daddy wouldn't leave you." In that instance, she had lost our connection because something was standing in the way between us visually. And I realized all those years later that I had lost my dad to an auto-generated email and some test info. None of that changed the years that we spent together. It was just an illusion in the moment that separated me from my dad, Jack Osborne. And the person who showed me that the best was one of my stepbrothers, also my second cousins, right? I went and told him that I had a DNA test that basically said we weren't related. And he picked up my DNA test and he said, "This piece of paper right here, this tells me that you and I aren't brothers." And I said, "Yeah, Jerry, that's what it said." And he took it and he threw it in the garbage can. He says, "There's no piece of paper you can bring in here that tells me you and I aren't brothers. Nothing changes. I don't give a what that piece of paper says. You're going to tell me that our 60 years together was a lie?" I was like, wow. So we put so much emphasis on DNA. Honestly, we shouldn't. I really think we shouldn't. Going back to my parents, I realized that each one of them had their own issues, their own reasons for keeping their secrets. And I realized this one day when my friend asked me, "Do you wish your dad was still alive so you could talk to him about it?" And I said, "Oh God, I'm so glad that he's not. I mean, of course, I'd love to see him. Of course, I want my dad back." But I said, I couldn't possibly bear to sit across the table from him and look him in the eyes and tell him what I had learned, tell him the truth. I said, I couldn't do it. It broke my heart. Breaking his heart, it'd kill me. And that was the moment I had the epiphany. My dad knew. And he could not possibly bear to sit across the table from me and tell me the truth that he had learned. He couldn't do it. He loved me that much. That's when my heart just began to soften with all of them. My mom had a rough upbringing. She had a horribly difficult life. Did she make some decisions I would not make? Yeah. But you know what? It's her life. And when she found out she was pregnant with me, she had a choice. She chose life. And for that, I am eternally grateful. I am okay with everything that has happened. Everything. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm okay with it. I've accepted it. It's good. Because I think the only way that you can truly finally get to a good place, is you've just got to move forward with forgiveness, acceptance, and love in your heart, right? I know they didn't make a decision. I know they've done some stupid stuff. I know you don't agree with any of it or some of it. And not everybody's meant to be in your life. And sometimes you got to limit some of your relatives. But you just have to move forward with forgiveness and just understand they did the best that they could. Every parent's goal is to provide their child with a life that was better than the one they had. And that, by that standard, my mom did a great job. So I'm going to forgive her for all the things that maybe I don't agree with, and I'm just going to love her, and I'm just going to move forward. We put so much emphasis on DNA, and we shouldn't. Lily, I know you've heard this before. You know we share 50% of our DNA with a banana, right? We do.
Yeah.
A banana. We share 98% of our DNA with a chimpanzee. And in between us, right, just between you and me, just to figure out our lineage, they're splitting hairs. Actually, they're splitting that hair because of the human genome 300,000 times. Does it really matter? Because this entire process for me, what it taught me was not who my family is or isn't, but what family is. My new definition of family. Family is defined by love and commitment and nothing else. Jack Osborne loved me, and he was committed to me the day he died. He's my dad. Period. End of sentence. Peter Holmes, he gave me some great genetic material and some not so great genetic material. But his involvement in my life was limited to a fairly selfish act. So while he's my biological father, and I respect him, and I respect that, he's not my dad. right? Family is defined by love and commitment. And not everybody's going to have a great experience with their DNA surprise. You're not. The road is bumpy. There's dozens of people affected. Everybody has a different agenda. Love, forgiveness, move forward. But DNA shouldn't define your family. Your family should be defined by when you're at your most troubled point, the shit hits the fan, and you're on your knees. Who is the person you know is going to kick open that door and put themselves squarely between you and your problems? Who's that person that loves you no matter what? You may not share any DNA with that person. That person's your family.
Mhm.
That person is your family. And if the people who you share DNA with aren't those people, go find the family you deserve and love the hell out of them. Hold them close. Never forsake them. Make your own family. And by the way, if they happen to have your same last name or you happen to share DNA, that's a real bonus.
It is.
I happen to have that.
I can just feel the love that you now have in your inner circle and in the family, both from blood family members and the people that you've chosen to surround yourself with. People can't see this because it's a podcast, but I've been nodding along so much listening to you. If people wanted to hear the full story, read about it, get in touch with you, how could they do that?
Sure. I'm happy to talk to anyone, by the way, if they think it will help. So you can reach out to me on Facebook. Facebook is just DNA Orphan, or just search for Did Not Anticipate. Search for Did Not Anticipate on LinkedIn. My personal email address is JSOSBORNE81 at gmail.com. So that's JSOsborne81 at gmail.com. And if there's some way I can help, I'd be happy to help. So when my DNA surprise happened, I felt it was the worst thing, one of the worst things that could ever happen in my life. And now 3 years later, I realize it's probably one of the best things that ever happened to me in my life. It answered so many questions. It took away so many mysteries. And all of those things that I thought I was going to lose, my relationships, my siblings, if we had a good relationship before, now we have a great relationship.
I love it. Steve, thank you so much for coming on and sharing with me today. I really appreciate seeing you, talking to you, and listening to your whole story.
Thank you, Lily. You know, I said that my DNA surprise is one of the best things that could have happened to me, and part of that is getting to meet people like you. You've been so wonderfully kind, and I love the work that you do for this community. I know people don't thank you enough. So for everyone who listens, and for everyone who's been on your podcast, and for all the healing that you have promoted, I want to personally thank you. You're fantastic.
Oh, so sweet. Thank you. These stories are here for us to identify with. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, email npestories@gmail.com. You do not have to give any identifying information. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, I'd like to hear from you. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more. Come heal with us.